The first time I watched the film, I was actually just incredibly overwhelmed. Like, it really felt like testament to the on-screen, a contribution to like on-screen history in Black British cinema to the Nigerian narrative and the West African narrative, which I think largely when we look at the story of Black Britain on screen, it collapses into a Caribbean experience, and fostering is quite central to that. I think if you're first or second generation Nigerian, you've had some sort of exposure to it in some way. So I guess my first question, pertains to that, and this is a semi-autobiographical narrative. So how did you sort of approach like working with aspects of your personal life in making the film?
So it's tricky. I think when it's semi-autobiographical, it takes maybe a longer period to get that kind of access to the story, maybe in a way. And I think the sweet spot was that I was close enough to it for it to feel authentic and real, but far enough from it for it to feel okay telling the story at the same time. Because it's like semi-autobiographical, but it's also mixed with I was fostered, it's mixed with other people I know who were fostered, so it's kind of like an amalgamation. So it's like watching it isn't like an exact replica of my life, but there are elements lifted. So that's why I think it took a while to get to that sweet spot where you were like, it's close enough, but not too close.
And what about, I guess like you said you got to that sweet spot, but just shooting it in that sense, because I think you can get to that stage when you're kind of writing it, but what was like the process of being like making it?
Actually very joyous. I had such a great team, and a lot of the HODs were people I'd collaborated with before. Shout out to Still Williams, cinematographer extraordinaire, my brother from another mother. Mdamiri and Kemi.
What's the screen?
Star of Tomorrow.
Mdamiri
and Kemi. It's kind of like a knighthood where you say sir, but you just say Star of Tomorrow, Mdamiri and Kemi.
Right, okay. I remember that next
same with Sam. I did with me actually, also a Star of Tomorrow.
2 Stars of Tomorrow in one film.
Yes. Do you want to say that again, Tega?
2 Stars of Tomorrow in one film.
Okay. And
3? Should I have said 3?
No. I don't feel left out at all.
No. But you were saying you were talking about like your experience.
So my experience, and also Shegun Akinola, composer. I'd worked with them before, so it was great. This was our between those 3 guys. This is our 3rd collaboration, and it was just felt like a real. I was always trying to replicate the energy of my first kind of feature-length project, which was a moving image, which felt like very much a family. That film was about gentrification in Brixton. It was just like a family. The crew felt like a family. It felt like a bunch of artists in South London just coming together to make something that they cared about. And on a bigger scale with this budget, it felt the same way. And shout out to my producer, Myth Hopkins, who
is in the room somewhere.
In the room somewhere. I promised that I'd make people ask her questions. She's really shy.
That's me.
But yeah, it felt very much like that vibe on set. So I felt very comfortable. You know, filmmaking can be very capricious, kind of. There are stories of how that can go sometimes, but this is a very loving, caring crew, and I always say film's an infrastructure game. So once the infrastructure is set, enables all of the kind of creative stuff to kind of bounce off.
Well, I mean, that's really great because it's a very personal film, and what is consistently striking for me in watching the film is the performances and just how Sam, who plays Femi, how that's just a very deep internal kind of performance. So I think, you're definitely going to need to create that sort of frame to allow those performances to come through. But can you talk a little bit about the work that you did with Sam and Ty as well, the young Femi, in producing these like very, very deeply subjective performances?
We had a great casting director, Shaheen Baig and Aisha Waters, who helped find Sam and Ty Golden and our entire cast. With the kids, we worked in a really interesting way. You know, kids are one of the things that you're not meant to work with kids, apparently, or animals, right? In terms of that, in the kind of folklore. But I really loved. This was my first time working with kids, and I really loved it. Our approach to it was that they didn't see a script. Well, the ones who were like around the ages of 11, so the earlier scenes.
Right.
We just kind of worked from the ideas of character and a little bit of improvising, and just casting. When I try and cast like as close to the bone as possible, so like 99% the thing, and then build the character with whoever I've cast. And so that was a great way, and it was very flexible, which was really good. And Sam, in particular, the adults in the piece, or the older people in the piece saw a script, but Sam in particular was someone who just had a complete understanding of what we were trying to do. He's Nigerian, he's Yoruba like me, and he got the entire thing. So I was having with the entire cast what I just call conversations, not too much rehearsal, just very much conversations about character, about the trajectory of their characters, and then the rest we left on set.
Right. Okay. So just like really organic.
Yeah.
In kind of like revisiting the film, so I was able to watch the film when it premiered at Sundance London, but in returning to it this week, what really struck me is that it's a film about, fostering and that experience, but it's also a film about just boyhood, like black boyhood, and what that experience is like. And I think that in real life we kind of see the manifestations of those behaviours. We kind of encounter the same silences that Femi sort of expresses as well. But the film just feels really like a doorway into like how we arrive at that point, and kind of like sketches this landscape of I guess like the options or the scenarios that are available, like Mace and the teacher, in terms of the capacity for black men to actualise. Or there's a really, really small incidental moment when one of Femi's friends comes and he's like, hey, when they're coming into the school, and then I think it's Femi, he's like, you need to relax, like you're too happy, like, do you know what I mean? And it's like a really small thing, but I think the impact that has on a young identity kind of like forming itself of things that we don't really see, do you know what I mean? And we get this kind of backstory with Femi and his character. And how I was able to really access that reading of the film was through the kind of style and the aesthetics in the film. So I kind of have a two-part question in that sense about whether that was intentional and there were things that you wanted to say about black British or black sort of boyhood identity, but also how the way that you constructed the performances and how organic it was, like how did that work in you creating the visuals in the film?
I felt, when you fully trust your actors and you feel super comfortable, you can take ideas from anywhere. And there were moments, particularly when those three got together, those three school kids, they just had a rapport and an energy that produced results that were probably 100 times more than whatever I could come up with, little moments of improvisation. Right. So it's not, I think the script has inherent markers for kind of intraracial conflict, and like, for example, Nigerian kind of Caribbean tension around the names and stuff like that. But those guys also came up with a lot of stuff. That moment was very much was in the script, but it was given a kind of different gravitas by the performance.
When the way it was delivered. Yeah.
So there's always space for that. And essentially, aesthetically, the plan was always to create a single perspective immersive experience.
Right.
And so therefore, that's why so much of the film feels quite floaty and constant movement as you follow protagonists and you see the world from his perspective. Yeah. And we're trying to put you in his shoes, literally, to see the world as he sees it. And then you see that world grow as he says and change and ideas change. Yeah. So that was really the key ideology behind the aesthetics.
And I think by the end it really comes together because there's a lot of silence in the film and there's like a lot of gesture, and by the time we arrive at this final chapter when he is in Nigeria and he has that encounter in that super ostentatious house,
it's real Curse of the Golden Flower.
That's
what we were aiming for.
I'm going to London's Games to find out.
That's what we're aiming for.
But yeah, like you just kind of, you get it when he sort of, the way that he sort of exits with his mother, and even the final scene in the film, like you, I guess, create a language that we then, or that I felt when I was watching it, it becomes readable or kind of understandable in that way. So yeah. I have one more before I open it up, and it's like my selfish question.
Oh, go.
And it's about one of the textures in the film, because one of the ways that we really bond is through music and our love of alternative music. And I remember when I first watched the film, and there's that gorgeous headphone moment between Tope and Femi, and then we hear the Cure track come on, and I was just like, how the hell did you choose that song? In knowing kind of like the range of music that you kind of like listen to, like, can you talk through a little bit about your choices with the music supervision?
Yeah, well, that's our key bonding thing.
It really is.
So I knew, the film's all about masks and how we put on personas to exist in space, and particularly in that world as a teen, Sam's character is clearly wearing a mask to or what he perceives to be the right way he should be in that environment. And we're always dealing with this perception of with black teens in particular, because so much is put on us or put on them. Since I'm an old man now, I guess.
But it's really different now, because that is it's a very romantic moment, but also it's a moment of recognition, and we kind of grew up at roughly the same time, although I'm not as old as you.
It's true. And you don't look, your skin's fresh. It's glistening.
I drink my 2 liters, guys.
It's true.
But we grew up at the same time, and I think this moment that we're in now, which I love seeing black kids on skateboards, I love seeing kids with multicolored hair and just doing the stuff, but those moments of recognition were like rare to the point that they did exist. So it's like he obviously likes this young person, but that moment when you meet someone as a young person and they like the band that you like, and it's just like wow, and then the extra layer of being a black individual and having that experience is just like so powerful. And we were
lucky, Robert Smith had to, the lead singer of The Cure, had to see the clip, the actual moment, and agree with it before we could have it. So it was a personal win.
Can you imagine he's seen your film? Like, that's crazy.
I don't know if he even saw the whole thing. I think he just saw the clip.
But still, like, he's seen a bit of your film, and that's like pretty big. Like, that's like a big deal.
It's a big deal. I love the band, so it was really, it was not, because he could have said no.
It's true.
It wasn't the record label. It was all down to him.
That's dope, though. So, that's really, really cool.
Yeah. If he hasn't seen the film, I think we're gonna make sure that happens somehow.
Yeah, no, we should send him. I say we, I'm not involved, but like, that's you can
come. You can be there.
Like, maybe we can watch it together and like talk about the album.
It might be awkward if he sat between us.
Because it'd just be like looking at him and not the film. It's really weird. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out after. I think, do I have time? I've got some time to just ask one more. So also that moment with Tope, it's this romantic moment, it's this moment of recognition, and then there's this conflict as well between them, which is extra to the narrative. So why kind of like put that scene in about, I guess, colorism and how that is kind of playing? Like, what was your thought process around?
I think it's such an interesting scene because I want to give lead actress Ruth her props in that, because it's one of those scenes where, and I'm not ashamed to say, as a man, you kind of wondering if it could play out more romantically, but she really stood her ground in terms of what it meant for her to have that moment and how it should go. And we literally, it's something that Ruth came up with, and we let her have the moment, and it made so much more sense. And even I remember on the day shooting it thinking, this was a lot harsher than I thought it would be. And then I was like, of course it would be. And it's how your own, I guess, perspective can almost cut you off from a scene, from a moment. And it's why it's so important to trust the actors, because they know so much, and she knew so much about that character. And my producer Myth got that scene expertly as a woman in that moment. She understood exactly what it was. So I really loved the scene, how it played out, how it didn't play out as I initially intended, and how much Ruth, as a woman, as an actress, brought to that scene. And she took it to where it needed to go, because that's what needed to be said. Yeah,
well, it's ultimately about being able to hear. Do you know what I mean? And I think we all kind of like have blind spots. So just, it when she kind of just says, I want you to get it, it lands in a way that I think is really significant. And it's just like, a really wonderful texture. Like, I really do feel that this film is just like an artifact of Black British culture in the way that we haven't seen it before. And I think that kind of like scene, and that scene delivered by this alternative girl with these, do you know what I mean? There's just so many layers to it that I think are just like amazing.
Yeah, she's an amazing actress who will do very well,
Yeah.
and just it was a privilege to have her in that moment and to have her in the whole film.
Definitely. Well, I want to open it up now. I think we've got like some roving mics somewhere. So if there are any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Aoife is definitely a part of my heritage, and I agree with you. It's been demonized even by us to some degree in Nollywood films, and I just wanted a positive representation of it in a way that I hadn't seen. And what was one of the most interesting pieces of trivia from behind the scenes is that's a real Aoife priest, and on set on the day. Because we were using a local Nigerian crew, obviously, a bunch of them didn't want to come on set because they were like, "We got a jazz man. We're not doing it. We're not." I was like, "Really, guy?" I was like, because I think initially they thought we were going to cast an actor or something, but I had access to this guy, and I was like, "This is a legit priest." He gave Sam and me a legit prayer on the day, and I was very excited about it, because I'd never. That was the first time meeting a Aoife priest, and to meet him to be in Nigeria, having that moment was a big deal for me. But a portion of the crew just refused to come to set that day, and it shows you the kind of stigma of our own kind of heritage and culture, which is it is what it is to some degree. But I just felt like, at least in this film, we can have a positive representation of that as a positive thing. It meant a lot to me, and so I'm glad that you picked up on it. Oh, I think it was a lengthy process, mainly because I was still kind of stuck on how to tell the story in terms of the script. But I think it was helped by a few things. The fact that I kind of independently, outside of the system, went off to make what you could call like my debut feature to some degree, a moving image, which is completely outside the system. No Channel 4, BFI or BBC or any of that support. Just went, crowdfunded, got some money, and just a group of friends, artist friends in South London, making a film about gentrification in Brixton. So that got some traction, and I think that really helped the funders and people see that I have a particular way of wanting to tell stories, and maybe gives them a bit of confidence. And I think it's important to not always have to feel like there's one route to the goal in terms of we need to get funding from established bodies and etc. I think it's important to go off and filmmaking is democratized in the sense because of technology, where you can go off and make a film on an iPhone. You can upload stuff online. So I think it's important to take that kind of energy into your own hands. And then when you get to that point of doing another thing, you have an example or some following or something. You're not going in there kind of empty-handed, asking for support. You're going in there with some sort of backing and some sort of prestige behind you in yourself. So I think that's the key thing in terms of those relationships, right. And that's how I approached it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what it is when we're in Lincolnshire at the start and we're in a child's perspective, and that perspective is one to some degree of joy. The depth of field is a lot deeper, wider, so you really engage with the environment, the freedom of that space. And then when we get to London, we gradually narrow the depth of field, and we're still in his perspective, but gradually this character is getting more confused and things are getting a bit more chaotic. So very much the camera work was reflecting that. I really talk up the concept of immersion in this film because that's what we really were trying to do. The key question is, how do we let a character take us through three key landscapes and make it unified, and feel like you're taking every step and you're experiencing the landscape as he experiences it, rather than you're kind of objective as a viewer watching it. So everything we were doing with the camera work was about compounding out with the sound design. The great thing that is cool about being in the perspective is that you can then play with kind of truth and reality. So we could distort sound. We could do all kinds of crazy things. Create crazier hues. The film gets more redder as it gets kind of a bit dangerous. And so all of these things just gave us great flexibility to experiment.
Thank you. I could actually listen to you talk about the craft in the film because there's so many details, but we do have to go. Sorry.
We can talk about
Yeah, no, we'll carry on. But just a couple of things. So we've been really, really lucky to be previewing the film this early. So the film is out on general release on the 27th of September. So if you have liked what you've seen this evening, please tell your friends, loved ones and neighbours.
Yes, please tweet it and Instagram and
do
Facebook.
All of that into web stuff. And also this film is this preview this evening is an opening to No Direct Flight, an amazing season that I've been working on with Gayleen. And it fully kicks off tomorrow with the global meetup. Until the end of next week, we've got loads of really amazing screenings and discussions from makers from the African continent, from the US and Europe. So please do pick up a program when you leave. We've got an amazing short film that is diving into aesthetics and Black beauty tomorrow, Swimming in Your Skin Again. Lots of really big screen classics as well. We've got Belly on the big screen, which is like amazing. Tuki Buki, Black Girl, lots of things. So just pick up the program, yes, and check it out. But I think now we should just thank Shola again.
Can we?
Do you want to say something?
I'm trying to give you a thank you.
Oh, okay.
I just want to thank Tega and for all of her joy, her Black girl magic, and all that stuff.
You're welcome.